In today's video, I'm going to be picking every single week 0 college football game. The season is here, and that doesn't sound like too crazy of a statement because we have very few games in week 0. But the promise I make is that you're going to see me pick every game every week of the college football season. And so we'll start with week 0, where there's only 5 FBS games. And here on this beautiful website, Playoff Predictors, we've got 4 of them listed right here. I'm honestly not even sure if this is updated to have UNLV Idaho State, but trust we will talk about that game, even though I'm not going to physically click on it in this video to show the prediction. We'll just go ahead and cover that one last at the end. But because we're doing so few games, only 5 here, I'll have an opportunity to go a little bit more in depth, talk about some of the things going on in the game, some of the trends, the players, the things to look out for, and we'll just get right into it. So we'll start with the main event, Kansas State versus Iowa State. It's what a lot of you are here to hear about, and it's a big matchup. It's a top 25 matchup. It's a matchup with big-time Big 12 title game implications. It is a rivalry game. There are so many layers baked into this. Now, if it was up to me, we'd be playing this on one of the home stadiums and on one of the campuses of these teams, but unfortunately, that's just not how it's going to happen. It's in Dublin. It is what it is. If it wasn't in Dublin, we might not be getting it in week 0. So I suppose the trade-off for getting it a week earlier is that. Talking about the odds of this game right now, Kansas State is a 3-point favorite. They've kind of ebbed and flowed. I've seen them at 3.5, even 2.5 in some places, but they are the favorite by everybody's terms right now. The over-under for this game is 49.5, so not projecting it to get too crazy high scoring here, and I think that makes a lot of sense. To me, the biggest storyline to follow here is going to be on Iowa State's side of thing, and it's going to be their explosiveness on the offensive side of the football. Last year, they were a very explosive offense, one of the more explosive offenses in the country, and it was because of their 2 wide receivers, Jaden Higgins, Jalen Knoll. Both of those guys just got drafted in the NFL draft and are no longer on Iowa State. And Rocco Becht has never existed in a world without those 2 fantastic wide receivers. So he's going to have to adjust to life without them this year, and they're going to need to find other ways to have explosive plays. They have some receiving targets back, but nobody that was as explosive as those 2 last year. Like their tight end, Gabe Burkle, is not going to be taking the top off of defenses. They have 2 fantastic running backs that are proven, in Carson Hansen and Abu Sama, but both are guys that are a little bit more like red zone running backs. Neither of them had over 5 yards a carry last year. They're not super explosive running backs. They're going to be more guys that they can just have a steady running game with. So the question is, where is the explosivity going to come from with this unit? They have a few transfer wide receivers. They've got Xavier Townsend from UCF and Chase Sowell, a guy that comes in from East Carolina. Sowell of the 2 is the one that's getting a little bit more buzz right now, and you think might be able to have a little bit more explosiveness. I believe he had over 600 yards for East Carolina last season receiving. And so that's what you're looking for. Can they have explosive plays? Because Kansas State's front 7 is disgusting. They've got a lot of guys like Chidi Obiazer, I believe is how you say his name. He's one of those guys in that front 7 that is really nasty. They've also got a guy named Toby Osunnisamnumi. My goodness. I don't think I can pronounce either of those guys' names correctly, but they're both absolute beasts along that front 7. They also have one of the best linebackers in college football in Austin Romaine, Desmond Purnell as well. So that front 7 is going to be pretty menacing. It is the secondary where they have questions, and ironically, that's where the questions are for Iowa State, is can they have explosive plays pushing the ball down the field? We will see how Rocco Becht can handle that. And there's a scenario where Sowell's able to step up, but you're talking about 2 wide receivers that were taken in the first couple of rounds of the NFL draft. So not going to be easy to replace there, even if they have the same OC and some continuity there. It's just going to be an interesting storyline to watch here, and the explosive playmaking has not been there on the ground. On the other side of things, I really think this game is going to be determined by whether or not we get good Avery or bad Avery. I'm referring to Avery Johnson at quarterback for Kansas State. I do really like the fact that he's going to be in year 2 with Matt Wells as his offensive coordinator. Having that consistency will help him a little bit this season, and he does have a lot of his weapons back. I think Dylan Edwards is a guy that can make a ton of plays out of that backfield, and then you've got a guy in Jace Brown at wide receiver that really broke out. So he has his top targets back. Iowa State is replacing some things on their defensive side of the football this year. There's a little bit more questions, I think, when you're talking about that. So at the end of the day, I am going to be rocking with Kansas State in this game. But this is honestly one that could go either way. The spread reflects that. People's picks will probably reflect that as well. I think Kansas State is going to be better equipped to get this victory here in week 0. Our next game to talk about is going to be Fresno State at Kansas. Kansas breaking in their new stadium and welcoming in a program that is a proud Group of 5 program, one that has pulled off upsets like this in the past. In fact, the stat that is pretty fun is they're 6-8 versus power conference conference competition since 2018. So as a program operating at a very high level, I think underrated because they have to live in Boise State's shadow a little bit, but they've pulled off some wins in recent memory and done some things as a program. Now, the program is in a bit of a strange situation. Last season, they had an interim head coach and skipper who really did not orchestrate a very good season. It was dysfunctional, but they were still a solid team overall, almost made the Mountain West title game when it was all said and done. And so they bring in a new head coach in Matt Entz this year. A lot of people are excited about what Entz brings to the table because he won 3 national titles at North Dakota State. What I look at with Entz that doesn't make me super excited is the fact that North Dakota State as a program started to head in the wrong direction under Entz. Entz leaves, and then they immediately win a national title after. If you look at it, he actually coached 3 of the worst seasons for North Dakota State, arguably the 3 worst seasons for North Dakota State since 2012. He did have to battle through COVID, and no other North Dakota State coach had to do that, so you could argue in his favor, but still a couple seasons in there where they didn't win any conference titles. That was 3 seasons where they didn't win a conference title, and 3 seasons where 2 of those they didn't even make the national title game, which by that program standards is pretty bad. So I don't know how much I can trust Matt Entz to elevate a program. Fresno State's not like in a rut. He's not going to have to, pull them out of a ditch, but still, is he going to be able to elevate this program to the heights they know that they're capable of making? I don't know if that's what's going to happen here. E.J. Warner had just named the starting quarterback for Fresno State. He's a transfer. He played at Temple and Rice, I believe, and he's a guy that does not move the needle too much for me. He threw 13 interceptions last season, very mistake-prone. He didn't even hit 20 touchdowns, I don't believe, and he's just not a guy that I think is going to elevate the ceiling of an offense all that much. They do have a really talented running back in Bryson Donaldson and some solid pieces around him. I have no doubt that they'll be able to move the football, at least. And in the Mountain West, I don't think they'll be too bad of a team. But I just do have questions about this new staff and about Matt Entz as a head coach. And I just don't think they're built for a win like this on the road versus Kansas, because this is a real good Kansas team. Kansas trying to replicate a lot of the things that helped them succeed in November last year, like their offensive explosion when Zim Zabrowski, the offensive coordinator, was able to get down on that sideline, orchestrate things, help Daniels find himself late in the year. They beat Iowa State and BYU and Colorado, all Big 12 title contenders. They beat them all in November. They also nearly took out Arizona State and Kansas State. Those were both one-score games. So Kansas is no joke of a team, and Jalen Daniels is back at quarterback. Matt Lubick also comes in, so you just double down on the offensive proficiency that they're probably going to have this season. On the other side of the football, they do lose a lot of talent from that secondary. Obviously, you had Mello Dotson, you had Kobe Bryant. There was a lot to like there. But their secondary was actually really bad last year as a cohesive unit, or they weren't very cohesive, I suppose. So the defense really had some struggles. I do think some of those things they can turn around this year. It's DK McDonald, their defensive coordinator, who comes back for another year. And so I think we'll see some signs of improvement there. They're going to be healthy at the start of the year as well. They'll have that working in their favor. Going to be a strong home field advantage. So I kind of spoiled the pick a little bit already, but I'm going to be rocking with Kansas. They're favored by 12. I would take Kansas minus 12 in this game because I just don't have a ton of faith in this new regime at Fresno State, and I don't think this program is at peak efficiency, and the peak efficiency is where Fresno State can win these types of games. We're not seeing that version of Fresno State right now. We've got a big-time CUSA battle, Sam Houston at Western Kentucky. Last year, this one determined who went to the CUSA title game, basically. It was a big-time matchup, but this year, a lot more uncertainty. Neither one of these teams returns their offensive or defensive coordinators this year, and there are over 70 transfer players between these two teams coming in this year. So a lot of uncertainty, a lot of things that can swing. Western Kentucky has been a 10-point favorite. I believe they're a 10.5-point favorite in some books right now. So things are trending in Western Kentucky's favor, which you might wonder, why is that the case if both teams are breaking in so much new? Well, the case for that is the reason that they have the same, I don't know what that sentence was, but the reason that's a thing is because their head coach is still there, which is Tyson Helton. And Helton's been at Western Kentucky since 2019. He has a phenomenal track record with the Hilltoppers, and he brings in Abilene Christian's offensive coordinator, Rick Bowie, as one of those new coordinators I was talking about. And this is actually the seventh offensive coordinator that he's had in the last 7 years. So a pretty insane number. And the fact that he's had so many hits is crazy. Bowie also comes in with his quarterback, Maverick McIver, from Abilene Christian as well. They had a great attack last season at the FCS level, so you trust that. But let's look at the track record at some of these offensive coordinators that Tyson Helton has had at Western Kentucky. There's Zach Kittley, who is now the head coach at Florida Atlantic, that got his start basically with Tyson Helton at this school. You've got a guy in Brian Ellis, who's now a tight end coach for Alabama. It's pretty good to be coaching at Alabama. Josh Crawford, who's now the running game coordinator for Georgia. Ben Arbuckle, who was an offensive coordinator in the SEC at Oklahoma. Drew Hollingshed, who's now Coastal Carolina's OC. Will Friend, who is now the O-line coach at North Carolina, another power conference guy now. And Ryan Alpin, who's the offensive coordinator at Georgia Southern, which has been a fantastic offensive attack. His brother, Clay Helton, is actually the head coach at Georgia Southern there. So a little fun poaching going on there between brothers. But basically, a really impressive track record. And so I have the utmost faith that Rick Bowie is going to be the next great offensive mind that he was able to go out and find. They're going to have a bit of a transition in their front seven on the defensive side of things. So that's something to keep an eye out for. But their secondary should be a strength. And for Sam Houston, it's not a complete reset either. They have a little bit more change because they have a head coach in Phil Longo coming in that has not coached in 20 years. And this is going to be his first year with Sam Houston. But they have some things that are still there. They promoted from within for their offensive coordinator, which kept their quarterback Hunter Watson home, kept a lot of their guys like Cuevas Humphreys, Michael Phoenix. There's pieces of this offense that are intact. It's the defense that got shredded and they lost a bunch of guys. They only have like one or two real starters from last year that have returned. And so it sounds like they have half their team back on paper. But the continuity is not in the right place for Sam Houston for me to be super confident about them this year. Last year, their strength was not their offense. In fact, their offense was pretty weak, pretty bad. Their defense was what carried them, and their defense was what was awesome. Longo is an offensive guy. He kept some pieces on offense, but it's not the part of the football you wanted to maintain and retain. So I think they retained some pieces, which is nice, but it's not the pieces that helped them succeed last year. So I don't think they're going to have a very good year like last year, especially not like last year. They won 10 games. We're not going to be talking about that with Sam Houston. They could be solid in the CUSA where there's a lot of room to move up, not a ton of great programs in there, but I'm picking Western Kentucky in this Week 0 matchup. The final one of these four, we do have the Idaho State UNLV game to talk about as well, is Stanford at Hawaii. And this one's really intriguing because Hawaii is favored by 2.5. The Rainbow Warriors have lost 8 straight games versus power conference competition, and yet they come out as the favorites, 2.5-point favorites versus Stanford, which is pretty interesting. Stanford just announced their starting quarterback is going to be Ben Gulbranson, which is something that came out of nowhere. Gulbranson was going to retire and be done with football, and they convinced him to come out of the portal and be Stanford's guy, and then named him the starter. So it could be interesting. Gulbranson, I think, at his best, is a solid game manager, and he won a lot of football games as a starter at Oregon State. Last season, he came in a few spots, and he looked pretty solid, and who knows, maybe Frank Reich can work some magic. He does have a reputation as a bit of a quarterback whisperer, so there could be some actual legs to him being solid this year. And on the other side of the football, Stanford, I think, had a really underrated defense in 2024, which led to them pulling off some of those crazy upsets they did over Louisville and Syracuse. But the thing is, that portal exodus in the spring still happened. That defense got shredded. Everyone that was significant, like David Bailey, they're gone. They're out the door. And so the defense looks awful, especially in the secondary, where Hawaii can absolutely pick them apart. Flipping things to Hawaii's offense, talking about that Stanford defense being depleted, Hawaii's run and shoot has actually not been super fantastic. You've got Timmy Chang in his third year. One of his things he's tried to implement is bringing back the run and shoot to Hawaii football. It's been a disaster. Last year for Hawaii, Dan Morrison comes in and it was just awful. They've gone through 2 offensive coordinators in 2 years. They bring in a guy again this year, and he was at the high school of their starting quarterback, Micah Alejado, and coached Micah Alejado. And Alejado showed a lot of great stuff. The last game of last year against New Mexico, he threw for 5 touchdowns and 470 passing yards. So reuniting him with Arsenault and putting him in a position to succeed this year, I think that was a great move. And this could be the year where that finally clicks. At the very least, they've got a great wide receiver duo in Nick Senecal and Pofele Ashlock. So I think the Hawaii passing attack will be pretty far along by the time we kick off here, and Stanford's going to be vulnerable there. So that's not a good trend for Stanford. And then on the other side of the football, on offense for Stanford, I was talking about Gulbranson. You talk about the running game. Stanford has a reputation for a decent running game, but they actually haven't had a 500-yard back in 5 seasons now, which is a jarring stat to hear, but Stanford hasn't been good on the ground. They haven't been good through the air. They've just been awful all around. And with all the dysfunction that happened this offseason, I don't think this is the year where we get something super promising. I also think the Hawaii defense was underrated last season. You look at their matchup versus a power conference opponent last year in UCLA, they held them to 16 points. Their biggest games of the season versus Boise State, UNLV, Fresno State, never did they give up 30. They gave up 28, 29, 21. That's pretty dang good, especially for the reputation that unit has. I'm going to rock with Hawaii and take them over Stanford at home to pull off what's not an upset, but aesthetically feels like an upset because it's a Hawaii program that's lost 8 straight versus power conference competition, and Stanford's obviously a bigger brand. So give me the Rainbow Warriors. That leaves us with the UNLV Idaho State game, which disappointingly is not listed here. I'm scrolling through, I don't really see it. But this one, there's a little bit less to break down. But basically, Cody Hawkins heads into his 3rd year at Idaho State. They went 3-8 his first season, then 5-7. Some signs of progression, which is solid, especially in a conference as stacked as the Big Sky. You could do worse than that. So they're moving in the right direction. This isn't the same joke of a program that was winning 1 game all year that used to historically get blown out by UNLV. But UNLV as a program is a lot further along. Obviously, replacing Barry Odom this year. You've got Dan Mullen in for his first season. I expect them to look good, look crisp. It's not a hot take to say that. They're favored by 25.5 points. My one thing I will say is maybe Idaho State has this as like a 14-point game at the half or something like that. Maybe they can come out with something because they're not just like the same lifeless program that they sort of used to be. So that's my 2 cents on that game. I'm going to take UNLV, obviously. So there it is, my picks for every single week 0 game. All due respect to the FCS, they've got some great games as well to keep an eye on, like Mercer versus UC Davis, the top 11 matchup. That was one to look out for. It's at a neutral site in Alabama. A couple of top 10 teams in Tarleton State and Incarnate Word headed on the road to keep an eye on. And they've also got the MEAC SWAC kickoff classic between NC Central and Southern. So those are all great games to look forward to as well. Definitely keep an eye out for those ones, especially if you're feeling like this is a little bit of an empty slate for week 0. But let me know down in the comments what your thoughts are on all these games. Do you disagree with any of my picks? Where would you go the other way than where I went on some of these picks here? It's a fun one to make. This one will be one of the shortest videos of this variety. The ones where we actually pick every game, like when we pick every game of week 1, will get a little bit longer. But I'm super stoked to get the season started. We are almost here. When I start to film these kinds of videos, it gets me even more amped for the season because it means we're so close. But I appreciate you guys for watching this one. Again, the CF Budge Discord is a thing. I encourage you to go join that. Link in the bio. Just literally go join. You can join for free, and then there's other subscriptions and stuff. That's the number one thing that, other than subscribing, I would like you guys to do. So I appreciate you guys for watching. As always, it's a blast making these kind of videos, and I will see you guys later this week. Let's get this season started.